Welcome everybody to our C Sharp tutorial number 3, and your host is Morex the coder. Yeah, well, this one took a little bit of a while because I had to set up I had to reinstall Mono on the PC that I'm using because I'm using my school PC and not the one from home, so I didn't set it up on this one. And we did change things last week in terms of coding. We're no longer using JDoodle, but we are okay. I'm using my favorite text editor, so in this case you can use your own IDE, or unless if you text editor, you can use Vim, you can use Nano, you can use any text editor of your preference. I just love it. Cool. So yeah, let's get to the middle of this tutorial video and what we'll be covering. So this week it's all about loops. So we're gonna cover the for loop, and then we'll cover the while loop, and then we'll do the exercise, right? Cool. So it all comes down to the first question, right? Whenever we're discussing about a for loop, we have to first understand what a for loop is, right? So a for loop is a control flow statement that allows code to be executed a certain number of times. That's a for loop, right? If you recall, in terms of the statements, right, we have the conditional statements. We have discussed that. In our exercise, we're going to solve it using the conditional statement. Then you guys will challenge yourself by doing the same exercise, but not using the conditional statements alone, but also introducing the control flow statements, right? So this is just a loop, right? So basically this is you having a piece of code, but you want to run that code a certain number of times. Instead of you recoding or having thousands of lines, say for instance you want that code to run 1,000 times, instead of you having thousands of the same code over and over again, you just want to put that code inside a loop, and then it will run as many times as you want it to run, right? Cool. So let's look at the syntax. So a for loop, you start with the for keyword, and then it's open bracket, and then you're gonna start with the first statement. Now this first statement, right? So this is where you usually initialize your variable. You can initialize it or you initialize it outside. It depends on whether you want this variable to be the scope of this for loop, and by scope it means that that variable can only be accessed inside the for loop block. Cool. So if you want to initialize it inside the for loop, you can just do that there, or you can initialize it before the for loop. That means that this is going to be the scope of whatever function that you have. I know we haven't spoken about functions yet. So in this case, it will be the main function or the main method, right? So you can just initialize a variable there, just declare it, and then initialize it in your for loop. And then you have statement number 2. This is a condition for your loop. So this is where the part where it says that a certain number of times. So you're going to specify how many times you want your loop to execute, right? Cool. Third statement. Now you've initialized a variable, right? You've declared how many times you want your true condition, basically. So that condition interpreted in this for loop will determine how many times your for loop runs. But now there's something that needs to change, right, before you actually meet the condition that is not being true whenever you get to that point. So basically you have a condition. You want to make that condition reach a certain point where it gets to be false, because you want to avoid something that we call infinite loop. Thank you very much. We don't want to have an infinite loop. To do that, we have statement 3, which is going to be updating the variable that is involved in the condition that we have. And then you just have your statements within your for loop, and then you close the for loop. I think let's quickly just do the while loop as well, and then we'll go do the coding. I think it makes it easy that way than us going back and forth slides. We'll just come back for the exercise. Cool. So a while loop, right? A while loop still is a control flow statement, but this one allows code to be executed repeatedly based on a given Boolean condition. Cool. So let's look at the syntax, and then when we look at this syntax, you actually see why this definition is being like this, or why I put it like this. You can define a for loop anyway, as long as you understand what a for loop is. So you can go understand what a for loop is, and then come up with your own interpretation or understanding of a for loop and give it a definition which makes it easy for you to understand. And if you're explaining this to someone else, they'll be able to understand because you are defining it based on how you understand. Cool. So that's the syntax of for loop, right? So you start with a while keyword, then parenthesis, then we have a condition. So that's the Boolean condition that we are talking about from the definition, right? And then you have your statements, and then you end your while loop. So yeah, that's basically a for loop and a while loop. And let's go through the exercise. Where's my terminal? There we go. Cool. So mktrc sharp tutorial tutorial 3. Cool. C# tutorial 3, then vim loops.cs, right? Cool. Did we change C# to vim, or we haven't, and this is the very first time? I wonder. I forgot, but I think we did. But if not, this is just, so vim is just a text editor that allows you to write code. Unlike an IDE, it doesn't give you suggestions, it just allows you to write your code. So you have to know your thing, you have to know your story from the word go before you even dare try to use vim. Otherwise you will find yourself stuck forever. So if you're using a vim, or you're using any text editor in general, you don't have the suggestions for the keywords or for your language, right? So you have to know your thing. And the reason why I use it is because it's hard, but it allows you to learn at a faster pace because you get to know. So you barely depend on the internet, you only depend on the internet for the heavy stuff, because as a programmer you still need Google, because you can never know everything, right? So you have to be careful when it comes to that. Cool. So let's start. So I know I haven't explained these, but I will explain this. Just setting up your environment system. You know, we always name it after our channel. You can name it after your name, as I mentioned before. Make code more fun and enjoyable, plus Morex. Static void main, and then we have string args. Coolness, right? So we have a for loop, that's what we're going to be discussing, right? And then we have a while loop. Cool. So sorry, there we go. So with the for loop, right? So as I mentioned, I know I've been a bit fast in terms of just setting up, but that should be fine. So with the for loop, you start with the keyword for, right? That's the keyword for, and then open and close parentheses, and then you get inside there, right? Now from the slides, you have statement 1, statement 2, statement 3. I said statement 1, you can either initialize a variable inside your main method, then you use the variable or initialize it. So basically you declare it. I meant to say you declare the variable, then initialize it in your for loop, or you just initialize it inside the for loop. So I'm going to declare and initialize inside my for loop. That's just mostly the general for loop, because you don't want a variable that is accessible outside that for loop, because if that variable was to be manipulated, it affects your for loop. So to isolate a for loop, you just want it to have its own variable. Cool. Int, just name it I, right? 0. Okay, just one, right? Cool. And then how many times do you want this loop to run, right? So if you want it to run 5 times, it's just going to be I, as long as I is less or equals to 5. And then now, so this is your condition, right? The summation, that's your condition. So basically you're familiar with that. That is why we started with the conditional statements before, because it makes it easy to understand if you understand the conditional statements. So this is the condition that is always going to be checked every time this loop iterates. So statement 1 only iterates once, so it only gets to be run once, and that's it. I mean, basically you don't want to always initialize a variable and run initialize, because you're going to be going back and forth. You're increasing a variable to 1, then it goes back to 0. You see, it's going to be an endless process, which is just an infinite loop. So it runs only once, and then you get to the condition, right? When you get to the condition, this is just a Boolean condition specifying how many times you want your loop to run. And then we end with the condition. So we want to always increase that because we start with 1, we want it to be always less or equals to 5. So obviously your I has to increase. If it was the other way around and you wanted your loop to end at 0 and you started with 10, so you're going to be de-incrementing. So you can either count from 0 to the positive side, or count from 0 to the negative side. It depends on you. Or not just 0 to the negative side, but from any number towards the negative direction, right? So you have two directions, positive direction and negative direction. You can either count towards the positive direction, or you can count towards the negative direction. I hope that is quite clear with everyone. But cool. Let's get to the statement. So let's just print out this number I, then we're going to start with 1, right? You start with a 1 and then runs the condition, right? Once it runs the condition, it increments. Then it goes on and so on and so on. So you will remember we use console dot write line, or just write. We're just going to use write line in this case. And then we have I. Cool. And then let's open a new tab. Cool. So ls, that's just the file we have. So C compiler, C# compiler, then we compile. Everything compiled perfectly. Then we use mono, which is gonna be loops, but it's .exe file. There we go. It counts from 0 to 5. No, it counts from 1 to 5. I meant it counts from 1 to 5, since we initialized our variable to be 1 at initialization, and then we just looped, we incremented by 1, continued and continued and continued, right? So that's your for loop. And cool, let's check out a while loop, and after this you guys are gonna go and discuss something else. Right now you have to discuss this too. Okay, so we have two loops. These loops, okay, they can be made to do the same thing, but what will encourage one to use a while loop and what will encourage one to use a for loop? So basically the main question is, where do we use which loop? Cool. So let's begin. So you start with the keyword while, right? And then you have a Boolean condition. Now this one is a little bit from the for loop, in a sense that now you have a condition. You have to first initialize your variable before you start even there using or getting to that condition. So basically now you see how a for loop gives you an advantage of initializing a variable that is only accessible within its block of code, and a while loop which is just, it wants a variable that is already declared. Then you can you declare it and initialize it as well, because you can't initialize it on a condition, because in that condition is just true or false. But who knows? You might be able to do that. I don't know. You can try that and see if you can actually initialize a variable and use it within a condition. I'm not going to do that, but you can do that. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, that do explore. Exploring is the only way that will make you or help you figure things out faster than just reading. You can read. Reading is good. Reading is necessary. Reading is compulsory, as to say. But exploring is highly recommended if you truly want to learn most of these concepts and fully grasp them, right? Because once you practice, because you learn by doing. So if you do something, oh, this is just you with your curious mind. What if I do this? What if I do this? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? Right? So just learn and enjoy. Cool. So int, let's just say one account from 80 all the way down to 60. Cool. So we have int num is equals to 80, and then it's console dot write while loop and line. There we go. Just so that we can separate the outputs from the for loop, right? Then cool. And then we have our condition. So we have num, right? We want this num to be less. Oh no. So since we're starting with 80, right? We want this num to be greater or equals to what condition do we put there? Isn't that interesting? So now you're doing it the other way around, right? So you're moving towards the negative direction. So you want your num to be greater than 60, right? So greater than or equals to 60, right? So if you don't get it, just put a line and then you put a big nice dash or a vertical line, a line that is just crossing the line that you just created, right? Horizontal one, and then you put 0 there. To your right is the positive direction, to the left is your negative direction. So if you go to the right and just pick a point where you just say 80, right, and then you'll be able to see your condition as to what you want. So basically you're just going to put 80 and then you move a little bit to the left, put 60, right? So you have 60 to your right up until 80, and then that's where you have your condition, and then you create your condition from there. So it's always good to have a pseudocode. It's more of a fake code. It doesn't compile, so it's one of the codes that don't have any syntax error, because it's not meant to be compiled but to help you as a programmer to create your program, right? Cool. So that is that, and then what we're going to do is print, right? Oh, line, right? So it's num, not I. It's num. Cool. After you've done with num, you just gonna say num. Since you're counting downwards, it's decrement, right? Let's check this out. Yeah, this cs, and then it loops, right? Yeah, loops.cs. Cool. And then it's mono loops.exe, right? There we go. So it counts down from 80 to 60, right? So mastering all these, right, you get the concept. And then once you get a concept, you have to do something else, right? Cool. My conditions. If I want to do this, how would I tell my program that this is what I want you to do? This is how I want you to behave. So once you get the syntax, the challenge that you get to have is, how do I own my program so that my program behaves exactly as I want it to behave? So that's one thing that you need to figure out. Because once you figure out that, you literally can do anything that you want. You can create whatever application that you want to create. Of course, you're going to have to learn a bit of frameworks there and there, but once you get the syntax and the basics, getting to learn the frameworks is not as challenging based on how I've been doing. I haven't really done any projects yet. Okay, I'm working on them, but so far so good. I mean, in terms of the practice and just owning, because I love learning first before I start doing project, because when I do a project is me testing my capability as to how far I can go, what am I capable with. So learning is my best friend, honestly. I learn on a daily basis, and even now as I'm teaching you, I get to learn a thing or two, because you can never know everything. But cool, that's a while loop, right? So a while loop does have a different variant, which is a do while loop, and we just gonna have it there, do while loop, right? Cool. So what a do while loop is that so the syntax of a do while loop is still a while loop, but then this is just a different variant. But then you can already suspect that this says do then while. So the first thing it does the action before it actually execute the while loop. So it do, you don't even have any condition. So let's just say we want to count from just say int a is equals to 1. So say we just want to do this 5 times or something like that. So it's better to just print in this case than to print a number, so that we know how many times it runs, right? How many times this runs, and then it's right to what's up with me in capital letter. Cool. So what I'm gonna have is hello, and then I'm gonna have a plus, let's do this, this is cool, and then my a gets incremented. Ooh, why am I having a space there? Just leave it there. Cool, that's you, right? And then after that, you just want to create a while loop. So it's a while, and the condition a is less or equals to 6, and then you end. So that's your syntax for the while loop. For the do while loop, you start with the do, then you have your code, and then you're gonna have your while, right? Let's also do that last thing, nice thing there. Console dot right. You saw how I used the right and all that, right? So do while, because I remember I did teach you both right line and right, and I explained what each does, right? So I'm just playing with them just so that you can also remember. But apart from that, it becomes part of you in terms of compiling or in terms of running your programs. So I'm just gonna compile, then I am gonna do mono loops.exe. So after this compilation, I create an executable file, which is this file, and then I'm just gonna run it instead of just doing it over and over. So this is more like my simulated play button, and there we go. It runs 6 times, right? From 1 to 6, right? Say your condition was wrong. If your condition was wrong, this condition was not met first time, this was gonna run once, and that was just gonna be it. That's a do while loop. Now let's just check the few concepts. So here's an exercise. I think I should let this one for you guys to do, because I want you guys to practice, not really relying heavily on me just teaching everything, because the aim or the purpose of these tutorials are to help you so that you can be able to stand on your own, right? If I just do everything for you, you won't get an opportunity to learn. So I'm just going to explain the project, then I will just explain a little bit of one thing, because we haven't actually discussed these, but with each and every problems you get to solve, there gets to be new concepts that you get to learn. So that's why I always would also recommend that you practice as many problems as you want of different kinds, because different projects, different problems requires different set of skills. Cool. So this is an exercise, right? So exercise is for you to create a simple calculator with the following features, right? It adds two numbers, divides two numbers, subtracts two numbers, and multiplies two numbers, right? That's basically your program. But then cool, how I want you guys to do it is that cool, let's get there. Okay, cool. I'm just calling it teams, right? So I want you to have two numbers, right? So the first thing that you're gonna have two numbers, or initialize two numbers. I don't have to tell you the data type. You already know the data types yourself. You can either make it a calculator that deals with integers, floats, double, or, well, both. It depends on how far you want to take it. Then I want you to take also initialize two numbers from the user, and then get a string for operation. This is not a doctor's operation, by the way. It's the operation like a mathematical operation. Either you add, divide, subtract, or multiply. That's what you're getting, right? Cool. So the thing that I want to discuss is how do you compare strings in C#, right? So say you have a string A, right? And then this is equals to I think I have messed up. Okay, cool. And then I have plus, so let's just say it's Morex, right? I just love using my name most of the time. Cool. And then I have if. So if I say, so basically what I'm gonna use is the method inside a string. So this is one of the string methods which we will discuss in future tutorials. So what else if you get to be a bit confused as to how do I know about this whole methods, we're gonna be discussing that in future tutorials. So you start with string. I know I haven't explained much. So this is the data type, right? Dot, and then you have a method called equal. Is it equals or equal? I think it's equal. And then you have the first string, and then you have the string that you want to compare to. So let's just type the same thing as that. So if it is that, ooh, what did I do? So I did a very bad thing. Cool. So what did I do? It's console dot right line, then say Rex, yay. Don't get too excited, right? If you don't get executed. Okay, cool. So there we go, my written file, and then let's clear, see if we're gonna get any errors. So we do have an error, does not contain the definition equal. So let's check equals. I hope this is the right way. Warning, a variable A is assigned but never used. I think we have messed up there. I think we've already used the variable A, so let's just use B. That's one thing about Vim, you have to shift to modes, right? So you don't just type, you have to change. Okay, cool, there we go, and we clear and we run. There we go, Rex. Yay! So our condition is met. So that's how you're gonna compare your two strings. Like your when you put your conditions, if this is addition, so if a person wants to add, you print the sum of the two numbers. If they wanna divide, you print the division of the two numbers, right? Hope you guys did enjoy, and you guys have a lovely weekend and happy Friday, everybody. Yeah, it's a day where we get to rest most of the time, but the code doesn't rest, by the way. So when you rest, make sure you've done your part in terms of the coding. And as I've explained before, don't allow yourself to be away from code for a long time, because if you do that, you will find yourself being a stranger to code, and that is not something you want. But that's it from me, guys, and I shall see you guys next week Friday.